no science. There is no science that any known psychiatric disorder is either biochemical or genetic in origin or brain-based in any way at all. Right now, we live in a society that is so corrupted by drug company money that you can't get anybody hardly at all on the air, on the major media, to talk about something as obvious as the role of psychiatric drugs in the school shootings. Just recently, we had another school shooting in Florida by a man who was being treated psychiatrically, leading up to his losing his mind. We don't know whether he was on drugs at the very end yet, but that isn't necessarily required, because psychiatric drugs can turn you into a very psychotic person who does not recover after coming off the drugs. Keep in mind that this young man was known by the authorities to have gone on social media and said that he was an angry and violent person and would somebody help him get a gun. That was known. Later on was known that the FBI was told, the local sheriff was told. The moment when he really could have been stopped, when the shooter at the high school in Florida could have been stopped, was when the Department of Children and Family was told that he was on social media warning or about his violence and saying he wanted help getting a gun. He was under their surveillance at the time. They were the ones the school was reporting him to and trying to report him to. Children and Family Services. They went to his home, the investigator. And this is what they learned, that he had just turned 18. He was now able to buy a gun. They learned that he wanted to buy a gun, but would not tell them why. They learned from his mother that he did not have a gun, but that she took his air pistol away from him periodically when he used it for things other than shooting at legitimate targets outdoors. They heard all that. Why didn't they immediately take an action? They had all kinds of powers they could have used. They could have used the law, brought in the sheriff. They could have committed him, which I'm not in favor of involuntary treatment. I mean, here you have a very good example. What would work best would have been the sheriff coming in and saying, you are a danger to others, you're breaking laws, you're making threats that are actionable. Well, the investigator called his mental health clinic, this 18-year-old's mental health clinic, right in the middle of this investigation, maybe even right from his home, because it's all written up as the home visit. And he calls the clinic, and the clinician, unidentified clinician who's treating him, gets on the phone and says, "Don't worry. We have him on psychiatric drugs, and he's taking his drugs and coming to his meetings." He was let go, declared a low risk, and his case closed because he was taking psychiatric drugs for depression probably, and for ADHD, and all the ADHD drugs of any power and all the antidepressant drugs are associated with violence. So because he was taking violent-inducing drugs, he was allowed to stay with a psychiatrist, because everybody believes in psychiatry and everybody believes in the drugs. I've been a medical expert in a number of cases that have involved enormous violence. I was a medical expert surrounding the Columbine shootings. And it's very clear that Eric Harris was taking antidepressants, specifically Luvox, which is fluvoxamine, that he was taking Luvox on the day of the shooting, because he had the expected blood level on autopsy that you'd expect from recently taking his meds. Now, even here again, the media enters in. USA Today said in one of the articles that it does every 10 years or so about these things that we now know that Eric Harris was not taking his antidepressant medication. And USA Today did not retract this incredibly false statement that they made that Eric Harris was not on drugs. I know that from being involved in the legal case surrounding the Aurora shooting in the theater, that terrible slaughter that took place, that he actually went to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist was an expert. People are going to have to say, and people are moving in this direction, no more of this. I'm not taking my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old. We have thousands of 2-year-olds on psychiatric drugs. We're not doing that anymore. But you can't just stop, and that's the point of my book. Because any change in drugs, starting them is dangerous, changing the doses is dangerous, and coming off of them has to be done slowly, carefully, with wisdom, and hopefully some decent supervision.